Father God, we thank you for your love and your grace and your care for us. Lord, we come this morning wanting to hear from you again. And so, Lord, as we turn to your word, Lord, we ask that you might speak to us afresh this morning. Lord, I pray that you might help me now, you might speak through me, that this morning we wouldn't just sort of hear maybe some thoughts and reflections on a passage, but that, Lord, you might speak through me this morning, that, Lord, you might minister to us, Lord, you might show us what you would want to reveal of yourself this morning through these words, but also, Lord, that you would be shaping and molding us into the people you would have us to be. So, Lord, just pray that you be with us now as we turn to you and as we expect, Lord, to hear from you. Amen. Well, we're going to spend now the next sort of 4 weeks looking at the book of Ruth. Sorry, I've got some alerts coming off here. Oh, that's good. Sorry. I've had so many problems with technology this morning. I didn't know if something else was sort of going wrong, but we're okay. We'll start over the next 4 weeks a look through the book of Ruth together. And the book of Ruth is a fantastic little book. There's only just the 4 chapters there, but there's so much in it. If you'd like to get a bit of a sort of overview, there's a video I posted up on Slack this week from the Bible Project, which gives you a great sort of overview of it. But to mention a couple of things without wanting it to feel too much sort of like a lecture. Ruth, if you could sum it up to being about one thing, if you can, I don't know, that might be tricky because there's a few different themes, but maybe the main theme is love. A redeeming love between people. We see that between husband and wife. Actually, we see that more in the process of grief of wives having lost their husbands. But nonetheless, you get an insight into that marital sort of love. And then you also see that love between mother and daughter. And then at the end, you sort of see the happy ending with Ruth and Boaz and a new marriage too. But you also see the love between God and his people. And really, like every book, I hope you sort of realize, but maybe it's worth just reiterating that every book, the hero and the focus is Jesus. Even in books where he's not named, they're all pointing to him, they're all saying something about him, they're all giving us expectations of what he will be like. And so actually Jesus is really the hero of this book. But the book of Ruth is somewhat unique in that it's a book that focuses primarily on female protagonists. They're not just sort of characters who appear within the story, really they are the main focus. And in fact, we don't know exactly who is the author, but the book is certainly presented from a female perspective, which again is somewhat unique within the canon of scripture. We don't really have many books in which that is happening. And so it gives us a unique and interesting sort of insight to think in this way. And it's a book that's intimately concerned with everyday life. You see that the story plays out in a family and within relationships, within a marriage, within the realities of trying to make ends meet. It's a book that's concerned with our sort of everyday life. And there's a few sort of key themes that we'll see sort of crop up throughout the book, and it might be worth saying them as we sort of begin this series. And that's that, firstly, it's not clear who the hero is. That being said, I've kind of given it away there a bit at the beginning, that Jesus really is the hero. But as the narrative unfolds, actually there's a number of different heroes, or should I say heroines, really, at most points. Is the hero Ruth, for sticking with Naomi, even when everything would say that she should go her own way and forge a new life, that to stay with Naomi surely is to mean that the whole rest of her future is lost? Or is the hero Naomi, for being the one who later on in future chapters actually matchmakes and makes sure that her daughter-in-law actually finds love and redemption with Boaz? Is Boaz the hero for not only actually meeting his obligations as a kinsman redeemer, which, by the way, some other guys who have that role don't do, and that's a condemnation upon them. Boaz does meet that responsibility, but not only that, he doesn't just provide for her. It's clear that he loves her. He wants to marry her. He goes above and beyond the expectations. He doesn't just give Ruth a son so that then she's financially provided for and safe in the future and give her money. He marries her because he loves her. Is he the hero? Or is it indeed actually as it is, I think God is the hero. But there's this wonderful thing that you see all of these great characters working, and none of them are squeaky clean. They're more true to life. They all have parts of them that you think, oh, did they do exactly the right thing? I don't know, but nonetheless, God works through them. So there's an interesting story there. We have this theme of love, as we said. There's also this theme of God's providence and care, and yet also the interaction of that with human action. That you see God working through what people do. And so it has a lot to say for us for everyday life. We see, and this may seem an obvious point, but maybe sometimes we struggle to see the obvious things and just recognize them, is that this is a book in part about dealing with grief. And you see that. That's a significant element of the story. It's about what grief looks like, what it feels like, and what it's like to process and to walk through that together with people. And that's important to reflect on. And we see, finally, as well, this theme of God's purposes working out for us in our personal sort of circumstances in life, whilst he is actually doing something on a much wider scale. And so we'll see that whilst the story focuses on this one family and the redemption that happens there, actually, it's really focused on the redemption of the whole people as well. It ends on the sort of genealogy leading up to David. And that's to give us the point and the reminder that actually what God was doing was, yes, on the one hand, working to redeem and to restore and to renew this small family. But in so doing, he's also keeping his purposes and his plans for the whole nation too. So it's a wonderful book with so much going on. But the question I think we're asked today, and the one we'll look at just in this chapter, is what do we do when our whole world seems to implode? What do we do when everything just seems to fall apart? Hopefully, if I can get my computer to do this, I'll share a picture with you. I hope it will show up okay on the screens, both here and at Showcase for you. It's quite bright, so I don't know if it'll be the best. I hope that you'll be able to see that. It'll probably look very small there, but that's one wee sort of penguin amongst a huge backdrop of ice. This is actually, whether you know it or not, some of you might be already aware of it, but quite a famous little penguin. I'm going to just come off the picture for now so you can see me. It's called Werner Herzog's Nihilist Penguin. And I know what you think, it sounds a bit like a sort of prog rock concept album. Pretty good title, in fact, but it's this wee penguin here. Whilst filming a documentary film called Encounters from the End of the World, they noticed this penguin. And it's interesting, actually, when you listen to the director before, he said, we set out going to the sort of South Pole here, determined that I wasn't going to make a penguin movie. I mean, it's difficult to know sort of what else you can film down there, but he's like, I was determined. I didn't want to fall into that cliche. But then we found this penguin. There was two groups of penguins there. There was a colony in which they're all living, and then a smaller group going out to hunt, to fish down at the fishing pools. And this one lone penguin who had broken away from the group and was neither part of the hunting group nor the colony. And in fact, despite apparent sort of encouragement from other penguins to come to one of the other groups, he doesn't. He sets about making a long trek towards the mountains that you saw there in that picture in the distance, some 70 kilometers away. And more significantly, sets out towards certain death. The penguin, in seeming sort of frustration and loneliness and despondency, was choosing to die, in essence, and so called the nihilist penguin. In the face of pain, anguish, famine, grief, depression, it's tempting to pull away from the people of God. But to leave the people of God, like this penguin leaving the colony, is to wander off towards certain death. And if the question is, what do we do when life seems to fall apart around us, when the floor seems to fall through? However hard things may feel, however comforting the idea of isolation might seem, don't drift away. That's the message of this first chapter of Ruth. Let me turn with you here to the first few verses, 1 to 5 here. And let me show you here an unwise decision and a tragic legacy. It tells us here in verse 1 that the book occurs in the days when the judges ruled and that there was a famine in the land. We don't know exactly when within that time period the book was written. Like I say, we don't know exactly who the author is. But at some point in that period of the judges, before Israel has a king, this is when it happens. And the interesting thing about that time period is we're given a summary of that in the book of Judges that summarizes the whole sort of time and all of the sort of cycle that we see in the book of Judges of God's people sinning, going against God's word, forgetting him, rejecting him, not being a distinct people, but instead just following the pattern of the people of the world around them, sinning, and then facing God's judgment, and that normally executed through enemies coming in and encircling them and taking over their land. And then them crying out, remembering God and crying out, and God graciously providing a savior. And their deliverance coming. And then when the times are good, people forgetting God again and sinning again, and it just repeating again and again. And the book of Judges summarizes it. How does that happen? Why are people so short-sighted? Why is their memory so poor? Why are they so fickle? Why is their faith so small? Well, it tells us everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That might sound like a really good thing. Everybody did what was right in their eyes. It's a good motivation and intention. They're trying to do what is right. Notice that. There's a good intention there. And yet, look how badly it goes. And you find the people of God making the same sins and the same mistakes as the people around them. In fact, in one tragic lowlight in the book of Judges, there's an incident where actually a particular tribe in Israel are doing the very same things that were Sodom and Gomorrah was judged for and destroyed for. The people of God, just as bad. And how? Why? Where do you get to that place? Well, they were trying to do what was right in their own eyes. It critiques that idea that you will have heard from your friends, no doubt, and I certainly have. Well, I don't need religion. I don't need Christianity to be moral. In fact, actually, I feel as though I can have a better, more focused, more disciplined morality outside of religion than inside it. And yet this critiques it. Because it says, actually, you don't have to seek bad for a society to completely implode in immorality. All you have to do is seek to do what is right in your own eyes. Because that is not a fixed point. That's the problem. That's the problem. You absolutely do need an objective, unchanging morality that is grounded in an unchanging deity, that is God. Because otherwise, if it's only in my eyes and your eyes, it's all relative. Arguably, isn't that some of the problem with social distancing rules? If everybody does what they think is right in their own eyes, everybody gives themselves a pass on something. Everybody thinks that they're the exception. And then it doesn't really work at all. This is the time in which the book is written. And after the book of Judges, we're left asking, and during the time of the book of Ruth being written, we're asking, when are we finally going to have a proper saviour? When is this going to end? When are we going to have a judge, a saviour who comes, who is faithful to the end, who doesn't give up or doesn't disqualify themselves or doesn't ultimately die, but one who is with us forever and one who is always faithful and always does what is good, right, and perfect, and always leads us into righteousness as a people and into life. When? The book of Judges cries out, when will we have Jesus? When will he be here? And so this is the time in which Ruth is written. And we read that this family here go to live in the country of Moab. They resettle and they assimilate to the world around them, and their boys intermarry with daughters of Moab. Moab was a country just to the side of Israel. I might even be able to quickly just show you a little map here to give you some sort of perspective of roughly where that was and how far that was. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So that's just sort of to the east of the Dead Sea. It would be roughly about a sort of 7-day journey on foot for them to get to. So not miles and miles away, but even just that bit of distance, the climate and the sort of temperature and things were a little bit different. And it meant that actually, whilst there was a famine in Israel, actually things were pretty prosperous over there, just the other side of the Dead Sea, where there was good rainfall and good irrigation from the sea as well. And so they go off in order to, find life outside of the famine that they're experiencing amongst the people of God. And when the chips were down, they decided that they must trust their own ability to save themselves, not God's provision. That's the decision that Elimelech makes for his family, is that when the chips are down, when everything seems to be falling through, my best bet here is to do something myself. I need to step in now. God's not delivering. I need to step in and make something happen for myself. And isn't that so tempting? Don't you know that feeling? I mean, you, like me, done that? You feel, well, I've got to do something now. We can't wait any longer. I've got to make something happen. Don't we do that? Even Jesus faces this temptation. You look at his temptation in the Gospels. That's exactly what Satan is tempting you with. You've been here 40 days with me. You have no food. You have nothing with you. You're here, you're 30-something years old. You're supposed to be the Son of God, the Savior of the world. No one knows you. You're completely unknown. You're a loser. You've done nothing at this point. Why are you trusting God's plans? Come with me. Make something happen. Make a scene. Throw yourself off the temple. Make a scene. Everyone will know that you're him. It's another temptation for Jesus too. Make something happen. Don't trust God's provision. Make something happen. And yet Jesus trusts God and shows that God can be trusted, that he knows better, that he does better at providing for us. But how many of you, like me, know that during COVID, that there's that temptation to distrust God, for that trust to waver, that there's that temptation to think that my greatest hope is for me to sort this, that if I act, if I step in. And yet look at this not only unwise decision, but a tragic legacy that ensues. We learn in the next few verses here, Elimelech dies, leaving behind Naomi as a widow. And after about 10 years or so, it tells us, then both the boys and the husbands of Ruth and Orpah also died. 10 years later, just about long enough probably for Naomi to have begun to process that grief of losing her husband. Now she loses her boys. Difficult to really do justice to the level of pain and grief that must have been felt. But there's long been a legacy of ruin for the family. The boys, their names even, we often know in life that sometimes there can be a lot in a name here. Marlon sounds very similar to the Hebrew word for sickly, and Kilion sounds very similar to the Hebrew word for pining. There's this legacy of ruin and tragedy, even before the eventual loss and bereavement. Naomi and Ruth and Orpah here have lost everything. Lost a father, a husband, we've lost sons, we've lost their financial security. They're now exiles in a strange land, Naomi is at least, and estranged from God's people. They had sought to save themselves in going down to Moab and actually had ended in ruin. They're left just for that pain to just be there and not really addressed anymore, but it's worth just taking it in for a moment of what that must have felt like. There's a tragic legacy there. Secondly, the thing we see here is Naomi worries that love will tear them apart. Ian Curtis, singer in Joy Division, sang this song of sort of this desperate feeling of just sensing your marriage and your relationship, your love crashing around you as you just drift apart from your partner. He says at one point, when routine bites hard and ambitions are low and resentment rises high, but emotions won't grow, and we're changing our ways, taking different roads, but love will tear us apart again. The subtext to this song is that he'd actually fallen in love with somebody else. And a new love was tearing apart an old love. You don't hear that in the song, but that's why some of these feelings are rising up. It's not as if they've happened in a vacuum. The marriage crumbles as that new love tears them apart. Naomi's worry is, and insight is, look, you're going to need to find somebody else, Ruth and Orpah. And when you do, it's going to tear us apart. That's a summary. And a summary really in these verses here from 6 to 13 is that, look, go now, because finding a new love is going to separate us anyway. Go now. Feel free. Feel that I'm not holding you back. Go. And to go now because she loves them. It's actually not just a negative statement, it's a really positive one of Naomi, a sacrificial, loving statement. Even in all the grief and the pain that she's experiencing, is saying, do you know, honestly, go find a new life for yourself. Don't be stuck here with me. Don't ruin your chances in your future waiting on me. Naomi here at her verse 6, that the Lord had visited his people and given food and realizes it's now time to go home and attempt to rebuild her life as best she can. And so she encourages the girls here in verse 8, go return each of you to your mother's house. It's one of 4 attempts that she makes to send them off in this way. In verse 11, 12 and 13, she speaks very similarly. And there's a loving loyalty here in Naomi to say, look, I love you enough to say, do you know, you really should go. You really shouldn't let all of your future kind of die out here with me. You should find a new life. She says to me in verse 11, look, have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? And even if they did and they had children, you know, would you be able to wait until they are old enough to marry you? Surely you don't want to risk all of your future staying here with me. The outlook is pretty bleak. And so she says to them here, verse 13, and you see in it that it's not just, and you know, sometimes this happens in grief, doesn't it? That you just find it hard to have people around you. You just want to push people away. I know that feeling in the aftermath of my dad dying, that you just want to push people away because you just don't know how to deal with people. But this isn't that. She says, it's exceedingly bitter to me for your sake. It's not just not wanting to be around. It's she cares enough for them, for their future there. It's like, you know, it's worse for me to feel as though, you know, you're going to lose the chance to kind of have a new life. I just really would wish you would go and step into that. It's exceedingly bitter to me for your sake. But now listen to the next part of this sentence here, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Actually, we don't know for sure whether this was God's judgment against this family. And that's important to say. That's not clear. God doesn't say that. But that's how Naomi feels. It's a reflection of where she is, what she's really thinking. And isn't that often what we process as we experience real pain and suffering like this? That we wonder, you know, maybe I brought this upon myself. Maybe he's judging me here. We don't hear that he is, but we don't hear that he isn't. It just leaves it in the air. She says, the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. And Naomi is wrong in being right. Do you know what I mean? That sometimes you can actually sort of have kind of a right answer, but be wrong in so doing it. I mean, this is something I've experienced through marriage. You can be wrong in being right. There's a really wrong way of being right at sometimes where you're not going to win. If you're going to do that, that's not a win. She's wrong in being right here. She's right in having this concern for them. She's right in saying that God controls all. He absolutely does. There's nothing beyond his command and his control, of course. But she's wrong in believing that God is malicious. God isn't malicious to her. And the reason we know that is, and we'll have to hit pause on it and just come back to it in later weeks, is that look to the end. Look to how it ends up for them. It proves that God wasn't malicious towards them at all, but this is how she feels in the moment. I've shared with you this before, but one of my guilty pleasures is Kenny Rogers, or one particular song, The Gambler. He has this great line in it which speaks to this. You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There'll be time enough for counting when the game is done. But she feels as though at this moment, God has turned his hand against her. And this is hard. This is very hard, these moments here. Not only to experience that pain, but even to feel that this might be the judgment of God against you. What a thing. You will know the pain of grief in different ways, some of you. You'll know the pain of thwarted dreams. You've gone out to Moab to find a new life, and it's just been a disaster. You'll know the pain of failed relationships or lost health. And it will look as though this may be God turning his hand against you even. And yet we're reminded in Romans chapter 8 of how God works all things together for the good of those who love him. We don't understand many times God's purposes. Maybe it's best sometimes not to attempt to answer exactly what his purposes may be. But we know that his purposes are good for those who love him. It looks as though love may tear them apart here. And it may even be the most loving thing, actually, to encourage them to go off. And in loving loyalty, this is why Naomi's seeking a way out for the girls. And yet it's met by the loving loyalty of the two girls who insist on staying. And we're not going to leave you. We're not going to leave you now after everything we've been through. Naomi worries that love might tear them apart here. Thirdly, we see a faithful pledge from Ruth. Verse 14 here. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. There's this genuine love and affection between Naomi and these two girls. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, it says, but Ruth clung to her. And the thing is, it's not as though Orpah wasn't lovingly loyal to Naomi. She really was. But the point is lesser to greater, that Orpah was lovingly sort of loyal, but Ruth was even more. And even more in a way in which you wouldn't expect. There's a great quote from a Shakespeare play, Twelfth Night. Love sought is good, but given unsought is better. Could never have expected that Ruth would have really loved in this kind of loyal and sacrificial way, and yet she does. Something amazing about her character and nature that she would do that, potentially risking her own sort of future to stay with her mother-in-law. It wouldn't have been easy for Orpah to leave, who had been loyal too, but Ruth was extraordinarily loyal. Naomi encourages her here, verse 50, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and back to her gods. Return after her. And now that the story is now taking a little bit of a twist, because just notice how Naomi words this here, that she's gone back to her people, she's gone back to her gods. Return after her. Naomi, whether she knows it or not, or whether this is a very clever device as well from the narrator who's putting this story together for us, the readers, to make this point here, is that Ruth's loyalty is really being tested here. And where does that loyalty lie and come from? And notice here that it's not just about staying with Naomi, it's about a people and religion too. Ruth pledges in response here, verse 16, loyalty, loving loyalty, to stay with Naomi. And she says, wherever you will go, I will go. And that she'll even be buried alongside her. There's a personal pledge there. But listen to this as well, as verse 16 continues. Ruth pledges loyalty to Naomi's people and Naomi's God. She says here, verse 16, your people should be my people and your God, my God. Notice that, and here's supposed to be a real punchline in the story here, is that Ruth, the Moabite, the foreigner, and it will remind us of this a few times through the story, Ruth the Moabitess. Ruth the Moabite wants to join the people of God and worship her God, the one that Naomi, her trust has kind of been on the wane. It's not non-existent, but it's struggled. It's kind of been depleted a bit. Ruth, the Moabite, is the one who has that faith and that trust that actually I'm going to throw in my lot with the people of God. And that we're supposed to see here a contrast. Because in the light of the struggle of famine, Elimelech, one who had grown up amongst the people of God, had made that decision, that unwise decision that led to a legacy of tragedy, to leave the people of God. He decided that his best bet for him and his family was to distrust God's provision and to save themselves. That bad decision led to a legacy of ruin, not only for him, but actually maybe more so for his family. Naomi decides, in the light of grief and loss, to let this bitterness sort of overtake and overcome her. And it literally consumes her and becomes the way she identifies herself. You'll see in a couple of verses on, she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. She means bitter. She's even taken that identity onto her very name and discourages her daughters here from joining the people of God, as if they would have nothing to offer in doing that. But now, in contrast to Elimelech and Naomi even, look at Ruth. Ruth, in the light of terrible loss, the terrible loss of her husband, and despite the encouragement of Naomi not to bother, to go off to a new life in her own land with her own people, she decides her best hope is not to rely on herself, is not to rely on her ability to find a new man and economic security and everything else that goes with that in a day in which you needed that as a woman in that culture. She decides her best hope is not to rely on herself or her gods, but on Yahweh, the God of Israel, and to join his people. And whilst we began the story with an unwise decision that leads to a legacy of tragedy, look now at a wise decision of Ruth's that will lead, as the chapters unfold, to a legacy of redemption for her sort of wider family, Naomi included, but also actually for the people of God. It'll lead to the birth of David, the faithful king who God appoints. That will ultimately lead to the birth of Christ. It's a wise decision with a legacy of redemption, in contrast to an unwise decision that led to a legacy of tragedy. Ruth displays this loving loyalty to Naomi because she's going all in on God. Her loving loyalty actually, first and foremost, is to God of Naomi. And there's a risk. There's a risk attached to this decision. There always is in the decision to commit to following God with all we have. There's a risk. The risk is that she may lose the rest of her life by not getting remarried. There's no guarantee that she'll meet anybody in Israel. There's no guarantee that anybody will want to marry her as an outsider and foreigner. There's no guarantee here that she'll find any greater economic security, let alone the emotional kind of fulfillment of meeting somebody else. But all that said and done, she believes it is better to be counted among the people of God and maybe not have anything else, maybe not have any of those things delivered, than to have a perfect marriage, to have a guarantee of a sort of stable income, to have a secure future or a safe job. It's better to be counted amongst the people of God. And there'll be some of you who are standing at a crossroads in life. There'll be some of you who are facing significant pain at this moment. And it may seem for all the world that the answer is pull away from God, pull away from his people. Be easier to be on your own, be easier not to have to answer those questions and give the same answer again, that nothing's changed. It may seem for all the world like the answer is try and save yourself, try and do something for yourself outside of God. But it's always been that the people of God must trust him whilst the cupboard's empty, whilst the account is low, whilst the medication isn't working, whilst they're still not speaking to you, whilst you've still not yet been vindicated. Abraham sets out for a city he didn't know. Moses leaves Pharaoh's court to endure hardship amongst the people of God rather than the sort of fleeting pleasure of enjoying sin in Pharaoh's court in that security. Perceives it's better to have Christ and nothing else. Ruth judges it's better to be poor, maybe even end up a spinster with Naomi, her mother-in-law, but be part of the people of God. You will be tempted also, in the face of pain, loss, calamity, to revert back to trying to save yourself, feeling as though I need to step in, I need to do something now. Don't do it. Proverbs 3 tells us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own insight. In all your ways, acknowledge him. We get Ruth's faithful pledge. Finally, we get this bitter lament of Naomi's and yet a quiet redemption here, verses 19 to 22. This book, one of the things I love about it is that all of the sort of potential heroes are not 100% squeaky clean. Naomi's a hero in the story, but you'll have noticed already that she doesn't get everything right. And again, all the main characters have little aspects about them that they don't get everything right. They're very human. They're very true to real life. They're heroes we can sort of identify with. And we get a glimpse here of Naomi's bitterness towards God in these moments. This changes eventually, but in this moment, she's still in bitterness. Since the whole town was stirred up because of them as they make their return into Bethlehem. The whole town is stirred up. They've set out for this better life. And no doubt some people would have criticized that decision as they did it and thought, you know, why are they leaving us? They're people they've grown up around to go and do this. And, you know, what's more, the decision hasn't worked out very well for them at all. It's all kind of imploded. You know, it's that thing as well. It's a lot like the UK, I imagine, Bethlehem then and us now, that, you know, in Britain, we love that story of rags to riches. People love it. But I tell you what story Britain loves more than rags to riches. Rags to riches to ruins. I don't know what it is about British people, but we love it. It's why we love the stories of lottery winners who kind of ruin it all, it doesn't work out. There's something there that we just like, that feeling of, well, there we are. They got what they deserve. They sort of thought they're better than anybody else. And that's exactly the story. And no doubt would have fueled sort of gossip, perhaps an amount of celebration that you thought you were so much better than us going off there to get this new life. And actually, it's worked out that we who stayed, it's worked out better for. So she says here, verse 20, don't call me Naomi. Don't call me pleasant is what her name means. Call me Mara, meaning bitter. She's taken those troubles on herself as her identity, kind of consumed her. Reduced herself to a label, just bitter, much like we do with many different things. Maybe it's with class or level of education or not, or level of income, or job, or appearance, health. Many things we can limit our identity to just being those labels. And Naomi, in her sadness and grief, is doing that here. She says here, verse 20, the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. He's testified against me. He's brought calamity upon me. You can hear that grief and anguish and pain again, just oozing out of her. And yet, you'll also hear the silence on God's part. And there's a temptation, I'm sure. And as I cast my mind back to being in places of grief and bereavement, as I've lost people close to me, there's definitely that feeling sometimes when you feel as though God is silent and just think, well, you know, are you going to say anything? Are you going to do anything? Are you there? And yet, I want to encourage you. I want to say in this story too, but encourage you where you are, that God's silence is gracious. It's gracious on the one hand because she's not judged. She's not actually told off for what she says. God has broad enough shoulders. There's no need to defend himself against every accusation, every sort of bit of upset. He doesn't need to do that. But also look a bit closer again here to how it ends. Verse 22 here, that Naomi returns and Ruth with her at the beginning of barley harvest. God might not say anything here, but God has brought her back. He's brought her back home. He's providing for her. And actually, we now see the beginning bits, and we'll see it much greater, much better later on as the story progresses. But you'll see God's loving loyalty. He hasn't abandoned her. It feels like that in the moment. And of course it does, doesn't it, for us? It feels for all the world as though we're abandoned, but we're not. But she's not abandoned here. This is only the opening credits. There's far, far more to come. But God shows his loving loyalty here. He's providing for her. He's bringing her home. He's brought Ruth into a new home, a new family. The story points us, as we close here, to the loving loyalty of the women on the one hand, but more than that, to the loving loyalty of God. He is the hero throughout the book. We'll see that in much more sort of colour right at the end as it culminates. But he's the hero here. Though we too have tried to go our own way, we try to save ourselves, we abandon God, we say and we feel as though he's abandoned us, and our greatest hope is for us to make things happen, for us to make things work. He hasn't abandoned us, and he doesn't abandon us. In fact, he's loved us. He's loved us even when we've not loved him. He's given up his own son for us so that he might die for our abandoning of him, so that we might be brought back to a new home, also in God's family as sons and daughters. Though the chips may be down for you, don't distrust God. Don't walk out on his people. Don't try to save yourself. Don't, like the nihilist penguin, wander off from the colony. To wander off is to wander into certain death. It will feel like for all the world, the answer is to pull away from God, to pull away from his people. Sort yourself out. But the answer, in fact, is to draw close to a loving, loyal God and to stay close to his people, where he is, where he provides for us, where he cares for us, where he blesses us. Don't wander off. I do invite you now to join with me in sharing a prayer of confession together. And sometimes when we share prayers of confession together, what we do is we sort of confess our sin, and we focus on that, and we repent from that, and we ask for God's forgiveness, and we ask for his help to turn to him in faith once again. But sometimes it's right to use confession actually to recognize our lack of faith, and to confess that, and to ask for his help in that. And so this morning, in the light of all that we see here in Ruth, in that struggle and temptation to trust ourselves more than God and to wander off, I want to invite you to join me in the words of this confession together. You'll see it there in your service book. You can either sort of join along where you are there in speaking out, or just listen to those words and agree with them at the end there. But it's to respond to all we've seen here together. Gracious and loving Heavenly Father, whilst you constantly move toward us in love, we know that we've often pulled away from your loving embrace. We've distrusted your plans and questioned your purposes. We've grown weary of waiting on your promises, and we've gone our own way. We thank you that you're not deterred by our rejection, and you do not give up on us. Restore our faith in your unfailing love, so that we might live and love as you have taught us. Amen. And now listen to these words of encouragement here from Psalm 78. Long psalm, so I didn't want to include all of it there, but you can perhaps read a bit of it later. Details all the faithlessness of God's people through the wilderness, all the ways they departed from him and abandoned him, and yet his response. And so listen here, because this is how he responds to us also, who've done many of those same things. It says of him here, yet he, being compassionate, atoned for their iniquity and did not destroy them. He restrained his anger often and did not stir up all his wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passes and comes not again. God is gracious and compassionate and forgiving toward us. And he is gracious and compassionate and forgiving to all of your sin and to all of my sin this morning, and all of my faithlessness and all my distrust. And he's faithful to answer, to give us the faith that we need to trust in him. I'm going to hand over now in just a couple of seconds, and we'll have a closing song here, Cornerstone. And it's just going to encourage us and remind us and stoke us up again just to to place all of our faith and all of our trust in Jesus again. And then after this song, Peter down at Showcase will close up for us.